Hello, Forever family, and welcome to our Product Power Hour. I'm Holly Stout, Vice President of Global Product Development, and I'm joined today by an esteemed member of our Scientific Advisory Board. You know him, you love to listen to him. Welcome to Dr. Peter Pressman. Peter, so nice to have you with us.
Pleasure, as always, to be here.
You know, I noticed that you're wearing a jacket, and we talked about this a little earlier. You said the temperatures are creeping up where you are, because I live in Arizona, and honestly, I'm going to get hot with my jacket on. So you look all bundled up. Is it starting to get cold there?
We've had sub 30-degree evenings.
Wow.
So we've made that switch from the balmy fall to the season that everybody dreads in this part of the country.
Oh my goodness. But you mentioned the word invigorating, and I like that because sometimes that chill can actually wake you up and keep you more alert.
Absolutely. That's especially what we keep telling ourselves by the end of the winter.
That's true. It's hard to sell that when you're at the very end. You're like, oh, please, can the sun come out? I get that.
We always joke in Maine about there's two seasons in Maine. There's winter and then there's road construction.
That's amazing. Well, you know, we're going to talk about a very important topic, and mostly because we just rebranded and relaunched an updated version of our popular Forever Freedom. And our FBOs are really appreciating and enjoying this product, and they've just recently got it into their hands. I believe we just started selling it a couple of weeks ago. We launched it at our Eagle Managers Retreat just lately in Thailand, and they're just now getting it into their hands and into their refrigerators and actually starting to drink it. And this is a really important product. It's been a long time beloved legacy product that dates back at least 2 decades. And it's a popular product for many reasons, but you're going to bring the science. I'm going to help break that down, and we're going to talk about some of the ingredients and the functions that these ingredients and why they're so important for the body. But before we do that, Dr. Pressman, we have a nice little tradition where we like to toast using a version of our aloe vera drinks. And you just recently received our Forever Freedom, and you have not yet tasted it. So our FBOs are going to get to enjoy this toast personally with you and me. So go ahead and pour yourself a glass, or if you've already poured, I believe you're going to use your mug right there. So let's go ahead and pour, and let's toast to healthy movement. Here we go. Oh, I love it. He's going in for more. How many of you have seen that before? This previously was a tough product to drink.
This is very refreshing.
And it's a little more smooth. Now, when we make changes to our products, sometimes our global FBOs, they get a little worried because they think, oh, you're going to take away some of the features, the benefits that we have loved for so long. And I want to assure everybody that this formula has only gotten better by the way of the taste. We have not changed the amount of glucosamine, chondroitin, or MSM in the formula. It still contains the same amount of aloe vera. It just has an improved, refreshing taste. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Dr. Pressman, we're in a world right now where we're seeing a lot of chatter about mobility and strength as we begin to age or as we start to adopt a more active lifestyle. When we talk about mobility, we always want to get source of strength from obviously exercise. We want to support the body with proper nutrition. And when we have those, what we call gaps, that's where we look to supplementation. And this product contains ingredients that, as you are aware, have been long time tested for the exact function that Forever Freedom was created. And that's an increased comfort in mobility. But let's kind of dial it back a little bit. You and I spoke about this topic, about the importance of nutrition and the importance of exercise when it comes to supporting the body. And you, from a medical perspective, have seen through your entire career people who have practiced good diet and nutrition and healthy exercise and people who have not. Why don't you speak to us for just a moment about the importance of using that as a foundational base to support the body?
Holly, as always, you've crystallized the most important point here, and I certainly will underscore and highlight that a little bit, and I want to also say that I'm especially appreciative of your point about the conjunction of exercise and nutrition. Years ago, a columnist who I have a running battle with typically in the New York Times asked me about my recommendations for the ideal diet, and of course there
Yeah.
is no such thing. But the my response, without discussing anything about dietary patterns through the age, through the ages, um, I said the most important thing is exercise
Interesting.
because without that foundational exercise, without stressing and strengthening tissues through exercise, through weight-bearing exercise,
Mhm.
all the good nutrition in the world isn't going to do very much. Now,
Mhm.
similarly, and to your question, what's the point, of good, of so-called good diets and of being compulsive about adequate nutrition when we have all these wonderful drugs?
Yes.
We have to not be too glib about mixing and matching food and medicine.
Mm.
I would say that without adequate nutrition, without the proper combination of foods, all the drugs in the world are not going to be very effective.
Wow.
Certainly, at the very best, they will be less effective than they can be, and that can mean a difference between life and death.
Right.
So the important thing is to establish a proper nutritional foundation, and and then we have the issue of drugs. And for me, this goes to the issue about what we tell consumers and what I
Mhm.
tell patients. Food, again, is not medicine. And what that means in this context is that we got to be straight with people.
Mhm.
The best nutritional supplement in the world, and remember, it says here on the label, food supplement.
Okay.
The best food supplement in the world is not going to make you feel better tomorrow or the next day or even in a week.
Okay.
Food is slow. Food is food is a lifelong pattern that you have to establish, or that you at least ideally establish. So if we attend to that, then we can promise people that when and if they have to take medication for various problems, and today we're talking about orthopedic issues, we're talking about the arthritides or joint inflammation, joint dysfunction, joint degradation. And
Mhm.
what we're also talking about with all these terms is aging.
Yes.
How can we make sure that if we need drugs in the future or even now, that
Mhm.
we're going to have a proper substrate so that they can be effective? And maybe if we attend to proper nutrition throughout the life course, um, and probably it's never too late to have a positive effect, then then we may never even need drugs, and
Right.
we may be supporting joint health, but that takes months and years. So
Yes.
again, we're not talking about a quick fix or a
Mhm.
cure or any kind of management for illness, for pathology. We're talking about honestly prevention.
Yes. A pattern, right? A pattern of behavior, a consistent pattern of behavior, making the right choices more consistently than the wrong choices.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's the big picture here. That's the general picture.
Yeah. I love that.
Be careful to make a distinction between food and medicine. The very popular phrase these days is to talk about food as medicine.
Yes.
This is one of the messages that's coming out of the Make America Healthy Again
Yes.
initiative. And I think it is a mass of confusion and contradiction, but especially with the assertion that food can be medicine, it is not.
Absolutely.
But
And
but it,
to
again, it allows medicine to be effective, and again, it may actually remove the need for medicine down the line.
And that also has, you have genetics, you have lifestyle impact, you have intrinsic, extrinsic, so internal factors, external factors, some things you can't control that all kind of come into play. And, you know, I like that we've kind of set this up because in the medical world, you have dealt with medicine, right? Drugs, or what would cross over into that, require a doctor to manage, require aggressive treatment in some cases. And at Forever, we do not diagnose, we do not treat, nor do we cure any sort of disease, illness, infirmity, etc. We leave that to you, the esteemed doctors in the world, to really understand your patients and to work one-on-one with them. But where we're talking is about inadequacies in the common diet, wherever you live in the world, and perhaps inadequacies that your body's experiencing. We're not talking about deficiencies, we're talking about those gaps, those bad choices, perhaps that overexertion in a day or a week, or, you know, whatever lifestyle you're living. So we're talking about supplementing, we're talking about assisting, adding aid to, supporting. And it's great if we could start with a healthy profile to begin with, right? Because then we're in a maintenance type of an area. Whereas if we're in a place where we've actually not made those good choices consistently, you know, we get to a place where we have to reach out to people like you. And we're really looking to help support the global Forever world by understanding that it's never too late to start, that you can always benefit by providing your body additional supplementation to those dietary inadequacies. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, and then you bring it to aging, which, man, sometimes I wake up in the morning and I think, what on earth did I do last night to deserve what this is actually so uncomfortable to get out of bed? And I understand that it's a natural process of aging. And sometimes I push my body and sometimes I don't. But I do need constant support as I'm aging for those deteriorations. For instance, we're losing cartilage, right? Cartilage is actually, we're starting to experience a degradation of cartilage. Our joints may not be as fluid and as mobile. Our muscle recovery may not be as quick or sharp. So there are a lot of things that as we're pursuing that lifestyle of exercise and activity and mindful awareness of what we're putting in our bodies, or nutrition, we're also experiencing the normal process of life that results in a body that might not feel as it did the day before when you wake up in the morning. And that's exactly what this Forever Freedom product is for. It is really a foundational supplement with a key, and I love I'm going to quote you, a concert of ingredients that work in tandem to help support those inadequacies. And to your point, this isn't a one magic bullet. This isn't something you take the night before and you wake up and you're ready to go and you feel 10 years younger. This is a lifestyle practice. It's something that you use continually to get those benefits long term. So let's talk about some of the ingredients, because you have some fascinating information about why glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM.
Absolutely. But before we do that, let me pick up on this issue of aging.
Yes.
And then let's go into this, because I think it sets up the importance of the ingredients.
Yes.
So one of the principal drivers of aging, and I say this with some degree of pain and personal involvement here, because as a really old guy, you know, this stuff becomes very, very important to me.
Yes.
Very, very real clinically. So all kidding aside, though, let's talk about cartilage. Cartilage literally exists throughout the body. It is the principal connective tissue, arguably soft tissue that exists throughout the body to provide compressive resistance or cushioning. This is a shock absorber. So let's think about the cartilage pads between all your spinal vertebra, between all the vertebral processes. You don't have bone on bone. The spinal cord runs through the vertebral bodies, and those bodies are separated transversely with this lovely, luscious pad of cartilage, which is kind of a hydrocolloid gel. So it's like a really viscous gel. It's a viscoelastic gel.
Very dense. It's very dense, right?
People have tried
Yes.
to replicate it in the
Yes.
commercial world for mechanical cushions. But
Good.
this stuff is great. It's in your spine. It joins your ribs to the sternum and to the spine. It cushions the hips. It cushions the knees. It exists at every end plate of every joint. So this
Good.
is every place, right? And it allows us
Yes.
to be active, as you point out. It allows us to run and jump and bicycle and play tennis and everything else. When we age, one of the principal drivers of aging is the dehydration of cartilage.
Oh, interesting. That would you say that again? The principle of age is the that is a fascinating statement. Let's focus on that.
Aging is a complex pathology with lots of drivers, but one of the most important drivers is steady dehydration, the loss
Mm,
of our capacity to hold on to water. This is
yes.
why this is why we get saggy skin and
Mhm.
wrinkles, and this is why we struggle to run. If you can run a 7-minute mile by the time you're 80, you're remarkable. Even though that very same person with ease could run a 5-minute mile at age 40.
Right.
Much of that has to do with the progressive dehydration of most of our critical tissues. So we lose not only muscle mass as we age, but we lose water in the hydrogel. It becomes less of a hydro and more of a flattened, inelastic cushion.
Yeah. And Dr. Prescott, I'm going to stop you right there because I think that there's a lack of an understanding when we talk about that dehydration process that's happening in the body, right? And we even talk about it into the skin. TEWL, TEWL, transepidermal water loss. It is a natural process, and I think sometimes we think, well, just drink more water, just stay more hydrated. And while that is a factor, you've got other things that are working against that in the body. So it's important to note that.
You're right.
Yeah.
And in fact, simply drinking water alone is at least the most inefficient way to rehydrate.
Absolutely.
Plain water doesn't do very well even in gut absorption. So
Yes.
you've got to take advantage of the transporters that are facilitated by other ions and other compounds. Now that
Right.
leads me to go further with the aging and cartilage issue. And this goes to our ingredients too. So
Mm,
the main thing that allows water to be held by cartilage in this gel matrix is a balance between ionic species. In other words, chemicals or compounds that are negatively charged need to balance compounds that are positively charged. So our
mm,
principal compounds, our principal bioactive ions in cartilage, in the structure of cartilage, are sulfate, an SO4 minus minus minus, and
mm,
Na sodium plus plus 2. So
mm.
we've got sodium plus 2, and we've got sulfates plus -3. And those sulfate moieties bring together a tremendous number of negative charges, which electrically tie up the sodium ions, the positive ions. What that does by tying them up in the tissue is draw water in by osmosis. Water
Mm.
likes to move. Water always likes to move from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. So if we can optimize this ionic net in cartilage, which osmotically draws in water, we're in great shape. As we age, we lose those ions, we hold water less efficiently, and therefore our luscious viscoelastic pads of cartilage begin to collapse and begin to break down. So that's the important part of dehydration here. Now, the strength of the cartilage itself, the proteoglycan elements of the cartilage, comes from other things that this supplement also provides. And so I want to talk about the ingredients.
Yes, let's dive in. Glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM. So we've got glucosamine sulfate, chondroitin sulfate, and methylsulfonylmethane in this as the supporting system and foundation of this product.
Right.
Let's talk about them. Let's dive in. What are they? What can they do? How do they function? And how do they support that ionic structure?
Well, they all basically do the same kind of thing, but in slightly different proportions. So the best way to talk about it is by mechanisms of action. So all three of these elements provide a structural support, provide the ingredients for structure. Glucosamine and chondroitin are precursors or constituents of that cartilage matrix. They're very important. The idea here is to supply an excess of or substrate availability for that matrix. So there are plenty of building blocks on hand, even when the processes of aging cause us to progressively lose those elements. So we want to have them on hand, and that will augment synthesis and reduce cartilage degradation.
Wow.
This has a meaningful anabolic effect in metabolism. In other words, we're building, we're not tearing down. The other, so you have that as a structural support hypothesis. Then we have the anti-inflammatory effects. Many preclinical studies have pretty dramatically demonstrated that both glucosamine and chondroitin can downregulate the inflammatory mediators. In other words, the interleukins, the TNF pathways, the metalloproteinases, and inhibit a number of other signaling molecules that really amplify the inflammation of cartilage that's breaking down and not handling chronic stress of the kind of irritation that results from even bone on bone. When you have friction, when you have stress, when you don't have adequate shock absorbing, what happens is these inflammatory mediators actually leach out into the soft tissue. So you get muscle irritation, you get tendinous and ligamentous irritation and inflammation. All these things are affected and contribute to the pain and the decrements in function. So anti-inflammatory effects are very important.
So Dr. Pressman, I'm going to stop you right there because I think our FBOs will hold on to that and they'll think, oh, wow, this is an anti-inflammatory product, right? I think they're going to make that direct correlation. And I want to just again stress that Dr. Pressman is actually talking about the metabolic function and a contributing factor to inflammation. He's not addressing all of the factors that could contribute. He's just really looking at the way, the pathology, the way the body is structured, and what could be a result as your cartilage and your joints are beginning to show signs of age. What Freedom is not is an anti-inflammatory, right? Again, we're talking about a supplement, we're talking about healthy nutrition, but from Dr. Pressman's perspective, he's isolating this now to a specific function in the body and a potential reaction that could be caused through the process of aging. Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Pressman. I just wanted, because I know our FBOs are hungry to make that tie, and I want to let them know they cannot.
An anti-inflammatory is a drug. Now,
absolutely.
We're not talking about an anti-inflammatory drug here. We're talking about a nutritional component that among its effects has a demonstrated anti-inflammatory effect in our preclinical studies. So
Right. Absolutely.
we're talking about again, this is every nutritional component we have has biochemical effects, has cellular effects, which are
Mhm.
dependent upon formulation and dose.
Yes.
And so what you need to understand here is that like any food, like even any vitamin or supplement, the doses here are are very small. Large doses bring us into the drug realm. And
Yes.
with large doses, we see all kinds of other pathways, all kinds of other effects that we need to catalog and we need to divide between beneficial and not so beneficial.
Right.
With 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 these food products, if you're supplying something that has a true nutritional need, that's not a drug, and it does not even approximate the dose of any drug, particularly the
Absolutely.
anti-inflammatories here. So you're absolutely right, Holly. That's an important distinction.
And you're also talking about diversity, right? We're going to talk about source here, where you say dose matters. And that's absolutely critical between a supplement and you get into the higher levels, which put it into the medication category, right? So, but we're also talking about diversity. And while you say glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM actually do a similar thing, I love that they do similar things, but they also have a slightly different approach. So they're kind of targeted, right? They're targeted, but they're just a slightly different approach. So you're getting, again, a nice, we'll call it the concert again, that nice synergy in ingredients.
It's an entourage effect.
Yes, yes,
And while there is no scientific definition of that, exactly, it's an entourage,
right.
it's a concerto, it's a contribution of different nutritional elements that have as a final common pathway the support of joint health over an extended period of time.
Yes.
So we talked about structural support. We talked about anti-inflammatory effects. We talked about, and we will talk now about sulfation a little bit. They
Yes.
all are associated with sulfur, which is a very important part of the formulation with this particular product.
So, Dr. Pressman, I'm going to ask you the question then. We have glucosamine sulfate, we have chondroitin sulfate, and then we have MSM, and you're talking about sulfation. What is sulfation?
Well, sulfation is exactly what I've been talking about with the cartilage and water holding hypothesis here.
Oh,
Sulfation is absolutely needed. The addition of sulfate groups is absolutely needed in cartilage proteoglycans. In other words, the actual
oh,
final structure of cartilage that holds the gel together requires the sulfate groups again for their negative charges. Now we
oh,
look at MSM here, which is a methyl sulfonyl methane, a fancy term that just means we've got a chemical vehicle that occurs naturally that actually drags additional sulfur moieties into the product and into this. So you have with this particular chemical taxi cab for the sulfates. In MSM, we have a beautifully water soluble organic sulfur that is readily absorbed. That's very important.
yes,
Bioavailability of these formulations.
yes.
And that it behaves more like a simple small molecular supplement than 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 a real element of nutrition here. Now,
Yes.
one thing I wanted to address when you brought up formulation with this product, I want to, I don't, you never really want to talk about something in the negative, but
Right.
we need to understand that as people become far more scientifically literate and and literate in terms of their health, with increasing access to online databases and
Yeah.
AI and all this kind of stuff,
Yes.
um, we need to be able to explain some of the questions and even criticisms that we are going to have to field. Um, the most important is, look, doc, or look, Ms., sales representative. Um, I've been reading that the connection between glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM and joint health is very dubious, that
Uh-huh.
it's inconsistent, that effects reported by patients are run the whole gamut.
Uh-huh.
What about that? We're talking about inconsistency here.
Uh-huh.
Well, we're going to explain inconsistency and very, very deliberately and gently and clearly, you say, number one, formulation matters.
Uh-huh.
Glucosamine sulfate. It's not glucosamine hydrochloride. This is very
Okay.
important because many retail supplements use other forms of glucosamine and
Uh-huh.
source them from marine um, marine origins where you run the risk of iodine allergies and other allergies. So
Uh-huh.
this becomes a hypoallergenic kind of a product.
Yeah.
And that's very, very important. So we're using pharmaceutical grade glucosamine sulfate.
Yes, we
Um,
are.
this is reliable. This is important. Um, Dose and duration. Many trials not only mistakenly use retail products or sources that are less that have far less purity and reliability than the glucosamine sulfate that we are using here. Um, but the trials are very short duration.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes as short as 6 weeks, sometimes as long as 24 weeks. But those windows are not adequate to see, again, the long-term effects of supplemented nutrition. So
Yes.
so there you get some real confusion about the effects or lack of effects because there
Yes.
are these confounds. The other
Uh-huh.
big confound, honestly, is the heterogeneity of joint disease. In other words, there's no such thing as osteoarthritis as a single entity. There are many, many
Oh,
subtypes of osteoarthritis. There are
interesting.
many. This is a disease that has so many polymorphisms or so many genetic flavors and varieties that that unless you define the subgroup, which most studies don't, it's
Right.
very, very difficult to tell any kind of outcomes. It's very difficult to interpret those. Some subgroups may respond beautifully to supplementation over time. Others
Uh-huh.
may show no change whatsoever. So,
Right.
so that also accounts for the variation and the somewhat diluted effects in the literature.
So this, Dr. Pressman, so this is kind of an example of dose matters, people differ, and science evolves, right? And then you
And,
also
and
have that
formulation,
your yes, and
formulation matters.
formulation, and right, absolutely. And where you're talking about a pharmaceutical grade of glucosamine sulfate, I just want to make note that this formula is actually shellfish free. So Forever has found a source that has those same compounds but without that shellfish nature, removing that potential allergen. And then of course we test for all of our products are tested for source to identify to make sure those ingredients are pure and from the source that the ingredient suppliers send to us. We test for all the heavy metals. We do all of that biological assay to make sure that the product is free from those types of ingredients that can sneak their way into less let's just say less perceptive supply or less perceptive manufacturers that are willing to take sources that are maybe hit and miss. But Forever, we don't do that. We're not going to compromise, and we're going to take every ounce of time to source the right raw material for this formulation. So dose matters, people differ, and then science evolves. And your last one was
Formulation.
formulation. There we go. Love that.
The other thing that sometimes people will throw at you, and I've had patients question me about this. Well, I've been reading on WebMD, that many of these compounds like glucosamine and chondroitin are simply digested into their basic constituents.
Right.
So why wouldn't I just eat food and not, what if it gets busted up in gastric acids, why? What? Well, the science actually has demonstrated that they are not entirely broken down to
Good.
trivial dietary sugars, that that these compounds are in fact absorbed. We have
That's
found
amazing.
them, we have found them increasing in plasma, in blood samples that we take serially over time. So we know that these compounds get into the blood and are transported everywhere and selectively uptaken in joints, in joint
There.
spaces. And
Wow.
the nice thing is that these compounds don't discriminate between knees, hips, and back or ribs. They go everywhere.
I love that, Dr. Pressman. This is the if you lose a finger and you eat a finger, you're going to grow a finger type mentality, right? Like we believe that if we take a specific product, it's going to go exactly to that exact area and do exactly that one thing. Where, as you're right, your body uptakes it and it's going to leverage it in any capacity that it needs that deficiency support. So I love that you mentioned that. This is great because I'm going to explore this further with you and at another time in another segment. I think it's very important to understand.
Let me mention one other thing. I have to also say that we found these compounds after dietary use. We found these compounds in the synovial fluid, which is an assist to the cartilage and essentially part of that whole matrix. So we're getting it right where they need to be. So you're providing extra support when you don't necessarily get it in the course of our crazy busy lives.
Oh, amazing. Well, Dr. Pressman, let's talk very briefly. We're coming to the end of our time here. Let's talk very briefly about MSM specifically. This is something I asked you to kind of look into. We've talked about MSM as being a natural part of the body. It's produced naturally. It's that sulfur compound. Talk to us a little bit about what MSM is and what it does.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think you can see MSM as a delivery system for sulfate units.
Beautiful. The taxi cab is how you referred to it. The taxi cab, right? For sulfur. That's
Well,
beautiful.
we can even upgrade the description, and it'll
To
be the
an
Uber.
Uber or a
It'll
Lyft.
be
There
the
you go.
Uber or the Lyft.
Yep.
So it's
Let's
it's
get
it's
current, shall we?
things in the body have a problem getting to places. It's not enough to get something in the blood. Um, you have to get it to be attractive to tissue, to receptors on tissue. So everything either needs a protein carrier like the albumin that you make and that goes into your plasma proteins,
Mhm.
um, or you need a delivery system, a transporter. And
Mhm.
so MSM can be thought of as a lovely form of transportation that
Mhm.
that takes this sulfate-rich moiety and drops it off, makes it attractive to the receptors on the surface of the connective tissue where it initially is absorbed and
Beautiful.
associated with cartilage. So this is kind of an exciting system here, and
Yes.
and the interaction of MSM with the other ingredients is also plausible and proposed as helping them along as well in this fashion. And the other piece of it that I think we have to mention because I don't think it's trivial is the presence of the aloe gel in the beverage.
Yes. Yes.
I think that to me really enhances the value of the supplement. We are about to publish a paper that looks at tiny amounts of many other constituents in the gel, aside from the magical sugar, aspartame. But for the purposes of my comment here, anytime you're delivering aspartame, the principal sugar in the gel, to tissue, you're going to see a salutary effect. And we know about the multitude of mechanisms by which that happens, and that can be a good topic for another program. But suffice it to say, the fact that the aloe is the, essentially the matrix for this supplement makes it, in my mind, a much more meaningful product.
I love, that's the cherry on top. That's a beautiful way to end this segment. We're looking at Forever Freedom with glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM, known to help support and maintain healthy cartilage, helps to support joint mobility, and the flavor, actually, we're going to talk about that really quickly. The flavor is improved because we had orange juice concentrate in the past, and we found that adding some lemon juice concentrate actually balanced out those sulfur components, which used to be really hard to drink. I'm not going to lie. I would take it and I'd really have to try hard not to make a face. But now it's actually refreshing.
This is an interesting flavor. It's different.
Yes, it is. It is very different.
It's distinctive, yes. But as you can see from me sipping this the whole time, I'm not choking on it at all. It's actually refreshing.
It is indeed.
This is a lovely formulation from, just from a consumer's perspective. From a physician's perspective, for me, it's part of the balanced diet that I would recommend for my adult patients.
I love that. And then you have the cherry on top, which is the aloe vera. And I love what you just stated, Dr. Pressman. That's reassuring to me, because in our product development process, we really do aspire to do things with excellence, to not cut corners, to make sure that we are creating products with the right synergy of ingredients, the right scientific backing. And I need our FBOs to understand Dr. Pressman will not talk to me about things that do not have scientific evidence. I mean, this is a guy who will stop me right away and say, actually, that might be popular media, or that's not really foundational. We haven't sourced that, or we don't have any cited sources for that. So he looks at the science so rigorously and so copiously to make sure that when we're speaking fact, and we're speaking truth about the subject, and as well as all of those surrounding features. There isn't a magic bullet, but at Forever, we do care about the way we create and craft products. We craft them with excellence. We take them to market. And as Dr. Pressman said, some of these can have wonderful benefits for you as you continue to consume it. You're going to take a recommended dose that is recommended in your region. Those vary because of these ingredients. They vary. It'll be anywhere between 2 to 8 ounces. Please follow those recommendations. Dr. Pressman and I probably consumed about 4 to 6 ounces just now. We live in the United States, of course. But I hope that all of our FBOs, the packaging is beautiful. It's now in our new PET bottle, which is produced aseptically. It is always a dietary supplement. This is not your aloe vera gel that you're going to be able, the recommended dose is 6, you think, well, if less is good, then more is better. Please follow the directions and instructions for use and let the product go to work for you. Dr. Pressman, thank you so much for your time. Always an honor, always a privilege. Cannot wait for our next Product Power Hour, where we dive a little bit more into the science and the power of these Forever formulations. Sending all of you the biggest hugs and loves. Thank you.